All right. Hello and welcome to everybody who's joining in to watch with us today. We hope everyone is healthy and doing their best to remain sane in this very unprecedented time. Before we get started, I just want to say I'm so happy that you're going to be hearing from Elizabeth and Kristen today, but we did just want to note nothing we say today is necessarily right or wrong or something that we suggest that you do. We just hope that you can take from what our experiences have been and learn from them, and hopefully you can put something into play that works for you. There's obviously no playbook, nothing any of us could follow in this situation, and often this stuff was happening with little to no notice. So we're just making the best decisions we can with the information we have available at the time. So with that, let's just jump in. I'm going to have our two other speakers introduce themselves. So Elizabeth, if you'd like to start, that would be great.
Thank you so much, Bree. I'm Elizabeth Racheva. I'm Chief Philanthropy Officer of Washington Performing Arts, which is in the nation's capital and actually the country's first nonprofit arts presenter. We present across multiple genres and multiple venues, around 60 main stage performances a season. We anchor the DC Public Schools arts education curriculum, and we also have a platform for community artists called Mars Arts DC.
Great, thank you. Kristen?
Hi, I'm Kristen Woodburn, and I'm the Assistant Vice President of Events and Stewardship for the University of Colorado System. So I'm located in Denver, Colorado, but we also have 4 campuses that serve and work with our wonderful system. My main role is doing event stewardship. So we do probably 20 to 30 pretty large size events. I also manage all of our gift clubs, giving clubs, and the events that steward those groups.
Thank you. And my name is Bree Aguila. I'm the Assistant Vice Chancellor for External Relations here at the CU Anschutz Medical Campus, also in Colorado. And I also serve on the board for ADRP. All right, so Kristen, let's just start with you. Can you tell us how this whole entire pandemic and situation has affected you and your role and at your institution?
Yes, I can. So just like everybody else, we were, this came really quick this just happened very fast, and we're all having to react and sort of shift our thinking. I can say we had 3 pretty large size events, two focusing on our donor societies and 1 for our board of trustees. They started anywhere from April, ending in late May, and we had to make the decisions very quickly to postpone those events and then kind of figure out next steps. That went into, figuring out the best communication plans, how to steward those donors. And our shop, we have a shop of about 3 people total, so we're a small team. And usually all of our time is consumed with events and event stewardship. So we've really had to refocus our efforts on donor stewardship, communicating with our donors, and kind of doing that in a total different way than we were used to doing it. But we've tried to focus on the opportunity, which has been just even in the letting our donors know, communicating with our donors, supporters about the cancellations. It's really given us a wonderful opportunity to visit with a lot of people, to touch base, to check in, and we've had some really meaningful and great communication with them. So I think that's been the real positive. Great,
yeah, thank you so much. Elizabeth, can you kind of tell us how this has affected your institution?
Sure. So also in myriad ways, to contextualize the moment for us, the mayor of DC issued on Wednesday, March 10th, the declaration that events of 1,000 or more were prohibited. To give you context for that, we present frequently at the Kennedy Center Concert Hall, which is a 2,500 seat hall. So this was a major impact for us. By Thursday the 12th, we made the decision to cancel 16 main stage performances. This week, with the extended state of national emergency, we made the additional decision to cancel an additional 6 performances. So those are in the total 22 events, performance-related events. Every single one of those events has associated special stewardship for all of the sponsors of those events, which in some cases are donor clusters of individuals, corporations, and foundations. Sometimes there's exclusive sponsorship, but it's generally a slightly larger group. Connected to some of those performances as well were 4 membership benefit events for our friends and then leadership level friends community, our chairman's circle. And biggest of all, our 600-person gala, which was scheduled for Saturday, March 14th, to be held at the National Building Museum. It represents around 20% of our contributed revenue goal every year, so it's a major, major part of our budget. So with the declaration on Wednesday the 10th, am I getting that date right? Sorry, Wednesday the 11th, March 11th. The recommendation was that events smaller than 1,000 could still be held, but arts and cultural organizations were urged to reconsider. So within the span, as you'll hear more later, we did decide by the end of the day on that Wednesday that we would pivot to a live stream versus a live event.
So we're obviously in a moving target right now. So Elizabeth, how far out have you all canceled events to this point?
Now we've canceled our entire season. So our season extended through early June. So we have been in the process over the last 3 weeks of progressively, because it was a staged cancellation. This week was the additional 6 performances, and the other, I should say that the first set of cancellations included a week-long festival that we presented in collaboration with the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts called the Shift Festival of American Orchestras. We hosted Boulder a few years back, actually, for this festival, the Boulder Philharmonic. But 4 orchestras were coming to Washington and presenting, so, and thousands and thousands of people were participating in this residencies and main stage performances across the city. So we have had, like, as Kristen was saying, the opportunity to have some incredible conversations with the sponsors of these events who have overwhelmingly been so generous in considering converting their support of the event to general operating support. Together with that, our team is thinking creatively about how we can continue to stay connected to our audiences and donors online in the coming months. So we have something called DEFT, our Digital Engagement Focus Team, I think that's what it stands for, that is looking at ways to create and share both original content and also content that our artists create. So we'll be seeking ways to amplify our main stage artists whose performances we had to cancel, as well as others with whom we have relationships, our local DC artists on our Mars Arts DC platform, and then our arts education curriculum. So, which uniquely in this instance offers us actually a much wider megaphone to champion arts education beyond the normal DC public school kids who receive it. And we see real opportunity in the coming weeks through those vehicles to steward donors. So we're actually talking creatively with the donors about, continuing to acknowledge them, and that can be through intro, outro, bumper, content to append to videos. If we're doing it, sharing the content on social versus e-blast, there are ways in the written copy that accompanies that content to acknowledge donors and thank them. And then additionally, we're thinking about how we might layer exclusivity and special stewardship on top of that for our donor communities. So thinking about town halls and conversations with our CEO, with our one of the reasons people look to us is for a curatorial voice. So how might we offer them, continue to amplify heightened access, which normally our donors will receive through an open rehearsal. Well, if we can't get to the rehearsal or the performance, let's give them an audience with the artists in their living room to talk about the process and to stay connected to the art form. So we're trying to think creatively about that, and we see real opportunity there in how we might connect donors to those experiences, both as sponsors in sustaining their support, but also just as friends.
That's awesome. That's amazing creativity. Definitely not easy, but I love all the different ways that you're approaching that. Kristen, how far out are you all canceling events at this point?
So at this point, we don't have another event scheduled until August. Part of that is that we just usually slow down during the summer, so that's a little bit beneficial to us. I will say, just like everybody else, we're not sure when this is going to end. We're not sure what the culture, what the atmosphere is going to be. Things probably aren't going to go back to normal overnight. So we are having long conversations with our leadership, with our partners, our trustees, our regents, looking, at what those fall events are, what those dates are, and trying to make some good decisions. I mean, we don't know, right? No one knows what's going on. So we're doing our best. I think we're trying to make informed decisions. But right now we have nothing going on until August, and we are still kind of business as usual in terms of planning those events in August and working with our vendors. I think one thing for us all to remember, especially event planners, is, this is a hard time for the event industry. And, I'm very close with a lot of vendors, and so they're having a hard time too. So, I'm trying to approach all those relationships with a lot of grace, and, trying to, when you reschedule or postpone, sort of that relationship really comes in. And I just want to, I think what Elizabeth said about creativity, that's been the, hot button word in our office as well. Like, we're just trying to think of, what can we do to connect with the donors, to share the message about the amazing things that CU is doing during this time, the resources that we're providing to people, whether it's in our healthcare, where Bria is at our Anschutz Medical Campus, or whether it's, virtual tours of the museum at our flagship campus at CU Boulder. So we're working on some things where we can put together kind of a package that showcases all these resources that from the system we can share with our donors. We're also thinking about those upcoming events and sort of, what was the purpose of those events? What was the end goal? What's the audience? And like one of them has new members that we recognize. So we're trying to come up with, are we going to send them a little care package? Like, what are we going to do to make those new members feel special? And, we find ourselves debating whether it's a good time to be mailing things. And so these questions are all coming up, and I'm consulting with a lot of colleagues on all of these things. But
I can imagine many people that are listening in today are having all the same questions, right? I mean, again, there's no playbook. We're just all trying to sort of figure out what will work. I mean, I think what we found the most is that you both have mentioned this, that just connecting with our audience in a very personal way has meant more to them. I mean, people are kind of alone right now, right? Everyone's at home, and it's not life as usual. And just letting them know that we're thinking about them, even though we can't see them as we had planned, I really do think goes a long way, whatever method it is that we're trying to engage with them.
Could I add that I think there's a way to, for all those nonprofits who have earned revenue that is distinct from contributed revenue, that could also be experiencing reduction at this standpoint. So if you're offering ticketed events of any kind, I'm sure for arts organizations, this is an existential moment because we can't bring people together. And I think for athletic organizations too. So a lot of us are thinking about that language around ticket conversion, to donation. So I think there's a way in thinking about stewardship to consider that community together with donors. And actually, it'll be really interesting to track the long-term conversion rate of attendees and participants to donors as a result of the stewardship they're going to receive in this time. So last week we launched something called the Champion Fund, and which our artists are champions and our arts educators are champions, and all of these donors who are converting their ticket purchases or who sustained their gala support even though they weren't having an in-person event that entertained people will all be recognized together with people making new or increased gifts during this time. So I think there's an opportunity to think about that too, and particularly for all those organizations whose everyone's endowment has taken a hit, but especially smaller nonprofits that may not have a very large endowment to begin with, are looking at emergency funds during this time. So I think there's a chance to think broader than just your typical donor community.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a really great point. So you touched on kind of where I was going to go next. So you, as you mentioned, had 3 days from what your big gala was supposed to be to sort of flip it and turn it around into something different, again, going virtual. So Elizabeth, I would just love to hear some more about that, as I know our other listeners would, kind of how in the world you could do that in 3 days with 600 people coming on Saturday, and it's Wednesday when you made that decision.
It's crazy. Well, I think to Kristen's point about event vendors, I would just echo that statement, and to send them all the love that you can. We are really, really fortunate to have an incredible special events consultant in RJ White Event Production and other vendors, Syzygy Design and C2 Auctions and our One Cause auction software, and as well as Event EQ and Show Call. All these people help present and produce our gala annually. And it was really through their teamwork and being willing to dive into it with us that we were able to move forward with such speed and success. So our event consultant really ran all the logistical vendor related conceptual design forward. So we had to literally chop down the set we had created for the National Building Museum to a set that would work in a hotel, a third of a hotel ballroom. We had a very lucky coincidence in that Our honoree, the extraordinary Sheila Johnson, is also founder and CEO of Salamander Hotels and Resorts. And so we were able to make it in person on site at Salamander Hotel in Middleburg, Virginia, in one of the small ballrooms there. So we created a sound stage and a video booth. And essentially all of our vendors just worked to flip what we had originally. Our extraordinary caterer, who couldn't serve the amazing meal we had prepared, worked with us to donate all the food to a local food kitchen, Miriam's Kitchen, and of course the flowers we also found a home for. So nothing went to waste. Luckily, everyone who's looking ahead right now has a lot more time to think about how to create this experience. And admittedly, one of the challenges in figuring out how to take galas online in the future, I think the ticketing and table levels now need to be very different, because for us, it's been a matter of talking to people about converting support they had already pledged, sustaining it rather. And it was such a quick decision. And I think ultimately it actually created quite a bit of institutional pride and sort of community and family pride that we were able to move forward. I think going ahead, when you're not going to be offering a dining experience, you'll have to think, we'll all have to think creatively and differently about how people are acknowledged in the course of the event, and also just plugging in a way that's meaningful to them for their value proposition. And I would anticipate levels of sponsorship could vary with time to plan. Ultimately, in the end, it became sort of if you remember Jerry Lewis and all of the PBS telethons, it kind of had that feel. And as an arts organization, and as a nimble organization to begin with, we felt pretty well positioned to just reorganize all of the performances that we had planned. Luckily, our artists who were in town were still able to participate, and we could do that with social distancing measures. But I think there's a real chance for all organizations in thinking about that kind of event to recognize it provides you more opportunity for storytelling and case making through great video content. Some of that was already always a part of our gala. Like, we have a paddle raise that follows what we call our Fund a Need video. Every year we struggle with the length of that video for our in-person event. And this was the first year where we thought, oh, it's great that it's 2 minutes longer than it's supposed to be, because people are going to be watching it on their computers. In the end, there were actually chances to achieve cost savings, right? Like, we brought ourselves within 65% of our original budget because we didn't have all of the in-person costs of the food and some of the decor. Our vendors were so flexible with us and working that through. And ultimately we sustained 80% of our revenue. And a lot of that, I think, had to do with, again, maybe just how fast it was, but also that our online auction, silent auction, was well built out. And truly, just like Kristen was talking about, the chance for communications with all of your donor groups and helping them be evangelists and influencers in their communities to spread the word. So in fact, our silent auctions, we've done remote bidding for a few years, have not had the level of participation that we did this year, ironically. And some of the bids came from around the country, whereas usually it's just all the people the night of in the room. Our live auction, which is for us a huge component of our revenue, was still very successful. And I think it had to do with people just really committing, because we communicated even more in advance with the donors who are nearest and dearest, who usually participate in that element, to ensure that they would still participate. It was also the biggest question mark the night of. Like, how is this going to go when we don't have people in the room inspiring one another with peer pressure to chime in? Because of social distancing, we limited our studio audience to really just our honoree and a handful of gala co-chairs in our boardship. So I'd love to just share with those on the call, I'll share my screen here for a moment, that we've saved all of these resources related to pivoting our virtual gala on our website. We offered a webinar a couple of weeks ago on the heels of doing it, just because we wanted other folks to benefit from lessons learned in the moment. And we had a conversation with all of our vendors who helped us, as well as our staff, in thinking through the communications, the graphic content, the video content, as well as sort of the live in-person elements. And you can find that on I'm sharing my screen now, on our Washington Performing Arts website. If you go to the homepage, this Continuing a Legacy link will lead you to a variety of resources, including our Fund a Need video here. And then, as you can see here, various PDFs and links to different elements that can help you learn more. all this stuff lives online for us every year anyway, but you get the added benefit of the webinar on the heels of the event. And I'll warn you, it had a lot of technical difficulties because I had never done that before. So you'll have to bear with us at moments. Actually, my colleague may have edited out some of that. But yeah, I hope this is helpful to you. And we do have an email address here. If you have follow-up questions, we'll try to answer them as we're able. There's been a lot of response. So.
That's great. That is so impressive. And I'm sure you will have some people reaching out just to ask even more specific, tangible questions that all of us event people end up dealing with, like how do you deal with the caterer, and even going through the fact of donating the food and all of that. So I'm sure you will have some follow-up questions. Thank you, though, for all of that. That was great. So my last question today is, as I say, never waste a good crisis. So could you both kind of just touch on how you're kind of using this current situation to make changes in the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, maybe longer, as you sort of think about how you're approaching events? Kristen, would you like to start with that, please?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And Elizabeth, that is super impressive. I want to shout out to that as well. You know, with our events just being stewardship events and kind of free events in which we honor people of certain levels, it's a very different thing. But I think that's great that you were able to go virtual. And we've been doing a little bit, I wouldn't say we're doing virtual events, but we're planning on the date of each of the events to send out some sort of communication that has you know, video messages from our president saying that he wishes we could all be together, some things like that. So, but I look forward to diving into your resources after this. But Bree, back to your question. So we're doing a lot of planning in our office. We are we're trying to get our we've invested in ThankView, as I know is a great product that a lot of people are using. We did not have it yet, so we are excited to kind of dive into that. We're also just looking into, that's just one example of an amazing product that's out there that can help us be a little bit more digital engaging to our group. We still, you know, have done the beautiful handmade invitations. That's kind of been our goal with a lot of our galas. I'm dealing with sort of the top level donors at our university. So we do a lot of mailings. We do have great team members at our marketing communications department that are helping with language, you know, definitely anything that's going on from our office across all the departments. You know, the tone has been shifted, the messaging has been shifted. We're making sure that we're not tone deaf or hoping that we're not tone deaf in anything that we send out, trying to be very sensitive and just checking in with our donors. So all of that has been a change. We just, you know, we have a stewardship committee, so amongst all the campuses. So we've been working with all of them, kind of just coming up with what the next things are going to be, really diving into stewardship. Really thinking about our online resources and how we communicate, and just sort of coming up with plans in which we can call our donors, check in with them, and we're still figuring it all out, to be honest. I mean, we've got events, like I said, they were run from late April through late May, and so we're looking at everything. We're trying to figure out how do we kind of make meaningful conversations, communications. We also don't want to just be another communication out there. We know that people are getting a lot right now. They're getting a lot of emails. They're getting a lot of phone calls. So we're trying to be respectful of that too. You know, if we're going to take the time to do a communication, make sure that it's meaningful, make sure that it serves a purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Elizabeth, how about you guys?
I think what's key right now is helping people feel like they can stay connected. As I mentioned with that Champion Fund launch, but we got out there to help share that digital content and offer a way for people to give and give back if they because people had even begun to reach out to us proactively to say, how can we help? We know this is really hard. But the stay connected piece was so much a part of it. So I think that's, like Kristen was saying, I mean, people are being inundated with requests. And I think the more we can all consider how our donors are partners with us and considering how we move forward and invite the conversation, help them feel informed, and even seek their feedback, as particularly with smaller institutions. You know, all institutions are making shifts in how we do things, but even especially for smaller institutions that may be making really big shifts in how you do things, inviting those who are nearest and dearest to the table to know, have kind of an inside look and even offer perspective is really valuable. I actually just remembered there was an additional event that we canceled, which was supposed to be tomorrow, our arts education luncheon held with one of our diplomatic colleagues. And so like Kristen, we're also looking forward to August. That's some of our performances have been able to be rescheduled for that time. We have a free lawn concert series with the Library of Congress that we anticipate moving forward, fingers crossed. And together with that, hopefully our arts education luncheon, which will now be positioned as a kickoff to going back to school versus this spring. One of the biggest shifts for us, there are two big shifts. One involves the season as a whole. You know, we don't know, we literally were ready to go and prepare for our season launch in late April, and we've had to rethink the entire season because will people be ready to be in concert halls again in the fall right next to someone else? So we're grappling with that. Likewise, we had some, as with all organizations, transition with staffing. So we had some open positions right now, and including 2 on the development department. We determined that we're in a hiring freeze until such time. We're not sure, you know, like everyone, there's just uncertainty is the word of the day. And with all of that, with a season that will look different in some ways, we're still not entirely sure how, we recognize that our activity needs to look different too. So there was this great article the other day in Chronicle of Education that I encourage you to read about the pandemic. And there was a line in it, "Calamity is a powerful teacher." And so we're really taking a fresh look at our whole membership benefit structure, because if we have a smaller team, you know, we want to take care of our staff too and their mental health, and we can't do as much as we did before. So what are truly the most meaningful benefits to our donors, and how can we provide those in both cost-effective ways, but also just, I guess, resource smart when it comes to human resource or dollars? And what can we sustain? What actually will continue to be online perhaps in the future? I do think that's one of the really interesting discoveries for all organizations is, wow, people love this chance to talk. They love to see our CEO's parrot that they've heard about before, and there the parrot is in the video. How do we provide that personal connection? And one of our hallmarks as an organization is really high touch personal stewardship. So how do we continue to move that forward? Again, in those creative ways, but it'll definitely mean a more focused suite of membership benefits, and rethinking as well. We're just taking a fresh, earnest look at our sponsorship benefits to zero in on what is truly most meaningful.
Great, thank you. You mentioned this, and I think it's important to touch on it, that we don't know what things are going to look like on the other side of this. You know, teams may look smaller, budgets may look different, and I think that is where some opportunity does come in. I think any events professional can say that sometimes you end up doing events that maybe you don't think you should be doing, and this provides an opportunity maybe to refocus some of your resources, just as you mentioned, and Kristen, like you said, really thinking about what was the purpose of the event, and is there a different way that we can get to that, especially if budgets are a little bit tighter? And so I do think while that doesn't always feel like good news, I do think there's opportunity that can come out of this. And I think focusing on where we can sort of get some wins is really, really helpful for your team as a whole. So that's all I had today. Thank you both so much for everything, for taking the time to chat with us. And hopefully those watching from at home have learned something, and I know all 3 of us would be happy to take any questions. You're welcome to contact us at any time. We would be happy to help if we can. Otherwise, I just want to again thank Elizabeth and Kristen today and all of you watching, and I hope everyone stays healthy and we can see everybody in person soon. Everyone have a great day.
Take care.